The Caliph arrived on a Tuesday morning at 0347 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Commander Elena Rodriguez was halfway through her third cup of coffee when the proximity alarms began shrieking across the bridge of the USS Defiance. Through the reinforced viewports of Earth's premier orbital defense platform, she watched 17 massive objects pierce the atmosphere like burning daggers thrown by an angry god. Contact bearing 27 Mark IV. Multiple signatures incoming. Sensor operator Jackson's voice cracked with excitement and terror. "Ma'am, these aren't meteorites. They're slowing down." Elena set her coffee aside and moved to the tactical display, her mind racing through first contact protocols they drilled but never expected to use. The objects, ships, she realized with a chill, were unlike anything in human imagination. Each vessel stretched nearly 800 meters in length, their hulls a mesmerizing fusion of blue-silver metal that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. They moved with impossible grace for their size, defying every law of physics humanity thought they understood. 17 contacts confirmed, Jackson reported, his hands flying over the sensor controls. Tonnage estimates put each one at, Jesus, ma'am, over 2 million tons per vessel. They're bigger than most of our space stations. The ships arranged themselves in a perfect geometric pattern around Earth, settling into synchronous orbit with mechanical precision that spoke of technology far beyond human capability. Most positioned themselves over major population centers: New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, Mumbai. But one ship, distinctly different from the others with strange crystalline protrusions along its hull, took position directly over Antarctica. "Ma'am, Admiral Martinez is calling an emergency conference on encrypted Channel 7, Communications Officer Parks announced, her usually steady voice betraying hints of panic. All station commanders and planetary defense coordinators are ordered to join immediately. Elena adjusted her command headset, watching as the Antarctic position ship began emitting some kind of scanning beam toward the ice below. Strange choice of target. Why would aliens be interested in a frozen wasteland when Earth's population centers lay exposed above? People, we are officially in first contact scenario. Admiral Martinez's voice crackled through the encrypted channel, carrying the weight of humanity's greatest moment and potentially its last. These beings call themselves the Caliph Dominion. They've been broadcasting on every frequency we monitor: radio, quantum, even some exotic wave patterns our best scientists don't recognize. Elena felt her stomach drop as Martinez continued. The message is simple and non-negotiable. Complete surrender within 72 hours, or they commence what they're calling planetary cleansing. According to their transmission, they've been observing us for over 4 decades and have concluded that humanity represents an unacceptable threat to galactic stability. Through her tactical display, Elena tracked the Caliph vessel over Antarctica. Its scanning had intensified, the energy signatures registering off their charts. Whatever it was looking for in that frozen wasteland, it was important enough to dedicate an entire capital ship to the search. All defense platforms are to assume condition red immediately, Martinez ordered. Begin implementation of all defensive protocols, including. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Protocol 7. Elena's blood turned to ice. Protocol 7 wasn't supposed to exist. During her years at the Naval Academy, it had been nothing more than whispered rumors in dark corridors. Stories of contingency plans so classified that asking about them could end careers. Old-timers would get a haunted, thousand-yard stare whenever Antarctica was mentioned in connection with defense strategies. Now, watching that alien ship circle the ice continent like a predator sensing dangerous prey, Elena began to understand that some military legends were more real than anyone had dared imagine. The question that terrified her most wasn't what the Caliph wanted with Antarctica. It was what they might find there. At precisely 1,200 hours GMT, every television screen, radio frequency, computer monitor, and digital billboard on Earth flickered and died. For 30 seconds, the planet fell into an eerie electronic silence. Then, simultaneously across all channels and devices, the Caliph transmission began. The being that appeared on screens worldwide defied easy description. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, Hierarch Zexthal possessed the elongated limbs of a praying mantis merged with the segmented body of a massive spider. For primary arms ended in delicate, articulated hands with too many fingers, while chitinous plates covered its torso in patterns that seemed to shift when viewed directly. Most unsettling were its eyes, compound orbs that reflected light like fractured diamonds, suggesting an intelligence both ancient and utterly alien. When it spoke, the words emerged in perfect, unaccented English, though the mechanical precision suggested advanced translation technology rather than natural language acquisition. Humans of Earth, I am Hierarch Zexthal of the Calith Dominion. Your species has undergone observation for 43 of your planetary cycles. During this period, we have catalogued your capacity for unprecedented violence, your systematic disregard for sentient life both within and beyond your species, and your dangerously rapid technological advancement. These factors, combined with your aggressive territorial expansion and resource consumption patterns, mark you as a Class 7 galactic threat. The image shifted to show holographic displays of human conflicts, wars, nuclear tests, environmental destruction, all viewed from orbital surveillance platforms that had been watching for decades without humanity's knowledge. We extend terms of conditional survival, complete surrender of all military assets and weapons technology, immediate submission to Calith administrative governance, and voluntary relocation of 90% of your population to designated agricultural worlds where you will serve productive functions under proper supervision. The remaining 10% will be permitted to maintain your homeworld as a cultural preserve, under strict limitations on reproduction and technological development. Zexthal's compound eyes seemed to focus directly through the camera, as if looking at each individual viewer personally. You have precisely 72 hours to signal your acceptance of these terms through your governmental representatives. Failure to comply or any attempt at resistance will result in immediate implementation of planetary cleansing protocols. Your world will be sterilized and prepared for colonization by more suitable species. The transmission ended abruptly, returning global communications to normal function. Within minutes, emergency broadcasts from world leaders filled the airwaves, but the message was clear. Humanity faced extinction or enslavement, with no apparent third option. 3,000 feet beneath Cheyenne Mountain, General Patricia Brooks stared at the now-dark screen in the NORAD command center, her weathered face a mask of controlled fury. Around the reinforced conference table sat the most powerful military and scientific minds on Earth, joint chiefs, nuclear physicists, intelligence directors, and several individuals whose presence would have surprised most of the assembled officers. Relocation of 90%, Brooks said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 7 billion lives. They're not offering terms. They're describing a genocide with bureaucratic politeness. Dr. Michael Reeves cleared his throat from his position near the back of the room. Most of the assembled officers had never seen the head of the Antarctic Research Division before today. Many hadn't even known such a division existed. His presence at this highest-level crisis meeting suggested knowledge that went far beyond studying ice cores and penguin migration patterns. General Brooks, Reeves said, his voice surprisingly steady given the circumstances, I believe it's time to brief the committee on Project Lazarus. A hush fell over the room. Brooks studied Reeves for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to hear is classified at levels beyond your current clearance. Dr. Reeves represents a research division that officially doesn't exist, studying something that could change the entire equation of this crisis. She gestured to Reeves, who stood and activated a holographic projector that materialized a detailed cross-section of the Antarctic continent. In 1987, during what appeared to be routine geological surveys, we discovered something beneath the ice. Something that fundamentally altered everything we thought we knew about human history and our capacity for survival. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a three-dimensional cross-section of Antarctica that made several officers lean forward in their chairs. 2 miles beneath the ice, nestled in what should have been solid rock, lay something that defied immediate classification. The structure stretched nearly 15 kilometers in length and appeared to be a fusion of organic curves and geometric precision. Part cathedral, part organism, part machine. We call it the Lazarus engine, Dr. Reeves continued, manipulating the display to show different angles and cross-sections. Initial carbon dating of organic components yielded results that our teams verified 17 times before accepting. The structure is approximately 65,000 years old, predating human civilization by tens of thousands of years. General Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, interrupted with barely controlled skepticism. "Doctor, are you suggesting this is some kind of alien artifact? Because if so..." "No, sir." Reeves cut him off, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "That was our first assumption, too. We spent 3 years cataloging every component, every material, every molecular structure. DNA analysis of the biological elements within the engine confirms beyond any doubt this technology is human in origin." The room erupted in a cacophony of disbelief and rapid questions, but Reeves raised his hand for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are not the first human civilization to reach advanced technological development. The evidence suggests that roughly 65,000 years ago, humanity achieved levels of scientific understanding that make our current capabilities look primitive by comparison." The display shifted to show detailed scans of the structure's interior. Crystalline matrices pulsed with faint energy signatures, connected by what appeared to be neural pathways made of an unknown metallic alloy. Massive chambers contained equipment that seemed to bend space around itself, and at the center, something that looked disturbingly like a beating heart made of liquid starlight. "The critical question," Reeves continued, "isn't who built the Lazarus engine. It's why they buried it under 2 miles of ice and programmed it with such specific activation protocols." Admiral Martinez leaned forward, his face grave. "What kind of protocols, Doctor?" "The structure has remained completely dormant for millennia. No energy signature, no response to any external stimuli we could devise. But 72 hours ago, at the precise moment the Calith ships entered our solar system, the engine began to wake up." Reeves activated another display showing real-time energy readings from Antarctica. The numbers were climbing steadily, exponentially. "Current power output is increasing at a rate of 12% every hour," General Brooks added grimly. "Our best projections suggest full activation within 60 hours, well before the Calith ultimatum expires." Dr. Elizabeth Warren, director of advanced research at MIT, stared at the readings with a mixture of awe and terror. "Michael, what does this thing actually do when it's fully active?" Reeves was quiet for a long moment, his expression troubled. "We don't know. The previous civilization left remarkably little documentation. What we have found are quantum-encrypted data fragments scattered throughout the structure. Most remain indecipherable, but we did manage to decode one message, carved into the engine's primary control matrix using a form of proto-writing that took our linguists decades to crack." The holographic display shifted once more, showing ancient symbols that seemed to writhe and shift even as they watched. Below the alien script, a translation appeared in stark, modern text. "When the wolves come for the children, the shepherd remembers his fangs." The room fell into stunned silence. Through the bunker's communication systems, they could hear ongoing reports from around the globe, Calith ships conducting demonstration attacks on military installations. Entire city blocks vaporized in precisely controlled displays of overwhelming force. But according to satellite surveillance, the alien vessel positioned over Antarctica had ceased all movement. It hung in the sky like a predator that had suddenly caught the scent of something far more dangerous than its intended prey. "Sir," a communications officer interrupted, bursting into the room with barely controlled excitement. "We're receiving anomalous readings from the Calith ship over the ice. The vessel has stopped its scanning operations and appears to be retreating to a higher orbit. Their energy signatures suggest they're running deeper scans on the ice cap itself, but maintaining significantly greater distance than before." General Brooks studied the tactical displays with growing realization. "They're not investigating Antarctica, are they, Doctor?" Reeves shook his head slowly. "No, General. I believe they're afraid to get too close." 18,000 kilometers above Antarctica, Hierarch Zexthal stood motionless in the command chamber of his flagship, all 4 arms working frantically at the holographic control interfaces. What their deep penetration scanners had detected beneath the ice defied everything the Caliph Dominion thought they knew about this primitive world. The quantum resonance signatures were unmistakable and absolutely terrifying. Hierarch, Subcommander Veltak buzzed from his position at the tactical station, his voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic. The deep structural scans have completed their 5th verification cycle. The energy patterns are confirmed identical to archived records from the Forbidden Vaults. Zexthal's compound eyes dimmed with dread. The Forbidden Vaults contained knowledge that the Caliph Dominion, along with 17 other surviving civilizations, had spent the last 12 millennia trying to suppress, bury, and forget. Records of the wars that had nearly sterilized the galaxy, conflicts so devastating that entire sectors remained uninhabitable to this day. Wars against an enemy so ruthlessly efficient that the surviving races had made a sacred pact never to speak their name aloud. But these humans, these supposedly primitive apes, they called themselves by that very name. They called themselves human. Display the resonance comparison, Zexthal commanded, his normally steady voice betraying hints of the terror growing in his thorax. The main holographic display materialized 2 overlapping waveforms. One represented the energy signature emanating from beneath Earth's ice. The other came from archives so classified that accessing them required authorization from the Supreme Council itself. The patterns were identical down to quantum fluctuation levels. "Are you absolutely certain of these readings?" Zexthal demanded, though he already knew the answer. "Verified through 7 independent scanning arrays, Hierarch. The quantum resonance patterns, the dimensional stability fluctuations, even the exotic matter signatures, they're all perfect matches. That structure beneath the planetary ice cap is definitely one of their judgment engines." The bridge fell into absolute silence. Every Caliph present knew the stories from the Forbidden Archives, tales that had given their species nightmares for 12,000 years. Worlds turned to crystallized ash in moments. Star systems with their suns extinguished, leaving only empty void where billions had once lived. Entire galactic arms stripped of all life, their planets reduced to perfectly spherical balls of compressed matter. And at the center of all that cosmic horror, the judgment engines, weapons so powerful they made modern starcrackers look like primitive chemical explosives. The humans weren't a recently evolved species that had stumbled into primitive spaceflight. They were the survivors, the inheritors, the sleeping descendants of the most terrifying military force the galaxy had ever witnessed. They had simply been dormant. "Hierarch," communications specialist Yixra called out, her voice breaking slightly. "We are receiving a direct transmission from the Human Military Command Center. It's coming through on frequencies that should be impossible for their technology to access." On the main viewing screen, the image of a human female materialized. She wore the insignia of what their intelligence suggested was a high-ranking military officer, standing in what was clearly a fortified command bunker. But it was what appeared behind her that made Zexthal's breathing apparatus seize with terror. Real-time footage from Antarctica showed something massive stirring beneath the ice. Energy discharges were creating geometric patterns in the frozen surface, and the temperature readings suggested that 2 miles of solid ice were beginning to sublimate directly into vapor. The ancient mechanism was not just awakening, it was preparing to emerge. The human female looked directly into the camera with eyes that held the calm certainty of someone who knew exactly what cards they held in this cosmic poker game. "Hierarch Zexthal," General Patricia Brooks said with deadly quiet composure, "I believe it's time we dispensed with ultimatums and had ourselves a proper conversation about history." Behind her, the displays showed energy readings that made the total output of the Caliph fleet look like flickering candle flames in comparison to a supernova. The judgment engine was coming online, and somewhere in the depths of their genetic memory, every Caliph on the bridge remembered exactly why their ancestors had learned to fear the dark between the stars. General Patricia Brooks stood before the main communications array in the NORAD command center, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she stared directly into the camera transmitting to the Caliph flagship. Around her, dozens of screens showed real-time satellite feeds from Antarctica, where something impossible was happening to the ice. "You recognize what that is, don't you, Hierarch?" Brooks said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. Your people kept records of what happened the last time the judgment engines came online. On the split screen, she could see Hierarch Zexthal's compound eyes reflecting patterns of light that suggested extreme agitation. His forearms had ceased their frantic movement across the control interfaces, frozen in what she recognized as the universal posture of a predator realizing it had cornered something far more dangerous than itself. General Brooks, Zexthal's translated voice carried undertones that the mechanical translator struggled to convey. Your species was recorded as extinct in our archives. The historical records speak of the final war, of humanity's complete disappearance from galactic civilization 12 millennia ago. How is this possible? Not extinct, Hierarch. Hidden. Healing. Learning to become something better than what we once were. Brooks gestured to the displays behind her, where the Antarctic ice sheet was beginning to glow with an inner light that made the aurora borealis look like a child's glow stick. But we were never defenseless. Dr. Reeves stepped into the camera's field of view, his tablet displaying real-time energy readings that defied comprehension. Hierarch, we've spent the last 37 years studying what our ancestors left behind. The Lazarus engine isn't merely a weapon of mass destruction. It's a test. A safeguard designed by a civilization that understood the terrible responsibility of wielding ultimate power. The camera feed switched to show aerial footage from Antarctica, where once there had been endless white ice. Now geometric patterns of blue-white energy pulsed across the landscape like neural pathways made of lightning. Massive crystalline formations were emerging from the sublimating ice, each one larger than a skyscraper and humming with power that made reality itself seem to bend around them. The engine only activates when our species faces genuine existential threat. Brooks continued, watching as Zexthal's tactical displays behind him painted his command chamber in urgent red warning lights. And it only remains active as long as that threat persists. Our ancestors built it with enough wisdom to know the difference between defense and aggression. The energy readings on her displays showed numbers that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. But more importantly, they showed patterns. Complex algorithms built into the very fabric of the ancient machine that evaluated threat levels, calculated proportional responses, and maintained ethical parameters even in the face of species annihilation. Your predecessors in the Caliph Dominion helped drive us to this point once before, Brooks said, her voice carrying the weight of 12,000 years of hidden history. Back then, we had become something monstrous in our pursuit of survival. The galaxy was right to fear us, Hierarch. We had forgotten the difference between strength and brutality. Behind her, the Antarctic readings showed the Lazarus engine approaching 30% activation. At this level, the quantum distortions were beginning to affect gravitational fields across the entire continent. Seismologists worldwide were detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to known physics. But this time is different, Brooks continued, meeting Zexthal's compound gaze through the camera. We've spent 12 millennia learning what it means to be human without being monsters. We've remembered that true strength isn't the capacity to destroy. It's the wisdom to know when not to. On Zexthal's tactical displays, warning klaxons were now blaring continuously. The energy building beneath Earth's ice wasn't just planetary scale. Quantum analysis suggested space-time manipulation capabilities that could theoretically affect entire star systems. What are your terms? Zexthal asked, his voice barely above a whisper despite the mechanical translation. Brooks allowed herself a small, grim smile. Simple, Hierarch. Withdraw your fleet beyond the heliopause. Acknowledge Earth's sovereignty and our species' right to develop without external interference. In exchange, the Lazarus engine returns to dormancy, and you don't have to explain to your Supreme Council how you accidentally triggered the awakening of humanity's ancient guardians. She paused, letting the weight of those words settle across the vast distance between Earth and the Caliph flagship. We're not the same species that terrorized the galaxy 12,000 years ago, Hierarch, but we're still their children, and some lessons, once learned, are never forgotten. In the deepest vaults of the Caliph homeworld, 37 light-years from Earth, Elder historian Vethka navigated through corridors that hadn't seen visitors in over 3 centuries. Her ancient carapace, marked with the ritual scars of her caste, moved with purpose through the bioluminescent passages leading to the forbidden archives, repositories of knowledge so dangerous that accessing them required unanimous consent from the Supreme Council. The emergency authorization codes had arrived 18 minutes ago, transmitted directly from Hierarch Zexthal's flagship. For the first time in recorded history, the seals on Vault Omega-7 were being broken outside of a galactic crisis. As the quantum locks disengaged, Vethka's breathing apparatus cycled nervously. She had spent her entire existence as keeper of forbidden knowledge, but she had never expected to access the Apex Predator files. Records of the species that had once held the entire galaxy in a grip of terror so absolute that mentioning their name had become taboo. The holographic displays materialized around her, showing data streams that had been sealed since the Treaty of Forgotten Names. What she saw made her thoracic cavity contract with primal fear. The sanitized records taught to Calith juveniles spoke of humanity's defeat 12,000 years ago, a narrative of galactic justice triumphing over warmongering primitives. But the true archives told a radically different story, one that explained why 17 different civilizations had agreed to pretend humanity had never existed. They hadn't been defeated. They had won. So completely, so devastatingly, that they had horrified themselves. The records showed the aftermath in brutal detail. The Celix Imperium, once masters of 47 star systems, reduced to a single agricultural world with a population of barely 3 million survivors. The proud Yth Confederation, extinct except for historical records and the crystallized remains of their homeworld. The Nexary Trade Federation, their entire species voluntarily sterilized after witnessing what humanity could become when pushed beyond restraint. Entire sectors of the galaxy remained quarantined to this day, their planets transformed into perfect spheres of compressed matter by weapons that operated on principles the surviving races still couldn't comprehend. Star systems where the fundamental constants of physics had been permanently altered, making them uninhabitable not just to organic life, but to matter itself. And at the heart of it all, the judgment engines, reality-shaping constructs that could reshape matter and energy at the quantum level, turning planets into weapons, solar systems into artillery, and space-time itself into a battlefield. But the most terrifying revelation wasn't humanity's capacity for destruction. It was what they had done with their ultimate victory. They had chosen to stop. The final entries in the archive showed something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that had achieved absolute military dominance, voluntarily limiting themselves. The ancient humans had looked at what they had become, gods of destruction capable of unmaking reality itself, and made a choice that no other species had ever made. They had chosen to become guardians instead of conquerors. The judgment engines weren't weapons of conquest. They were failsafes, designed to activate only when humanity itself faced extinction. The ancient humans had built them as a promise to the galaxy. We will sleep, but if you come for our children, you will remember why the stars themselves once trembled at our approach. Vethka transmitted the complete archives to Hierarch Zexthal with a message that carried the weight of 12 millennia of suppressed truth. The humans were never the monsters, Hierarch. We were. They simply became better monsters to stop us. Now they offer us something we never gave them, the chance to choose differently. On Earth, the Lazarus engine had reached 60% activation. The Antarctic ice sheet had completely sublimated, revealing a structure that defied architectural understanding, part machine, part organism, part something that existed in dimensions human mathematics could barely describe. It pulsed with energy signatures that made reality ripple like disturbed water, and the quantum resonance was beginning to affect gravitational fields throughout the solar system. But it wasn't targeting the Calith ships. It was simply waiting. Your move, Hierarch, General Brooks transmitted, her voice carrying the patience of someone who understood exactly what power meant and what it cost. The Calith withdrawal began at 0347 hours GMT, exactly 72 hours after their arrival, but for reasons none of Earth's politicians had anticipated. 17 massive ships lifted from their orbital positions with a grace that belied their obvious haste, their blue-silver hulls shimmering as they accelerated toward the edge of the solar system. Hierarch Zexthal's final transmission to Earth Command was broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, ensuring that both military leadership and civilian populations would hear the alien commander's words. The Caliph Dominion formally acknowledges the sovereignty of the human homeworld and the inherent right of humanity to exist without external interference. We withdraw our fleet and our ultimatum. We will trouble your species no further. In the NORAD Command Center, General Brooks watched the energy signatures fade from her displays as the alien ships disappeared beyond the heliopause. Around her, officers and technicians who had spent 3 days preparing for humanity's final stand now sat in stunned silence, struggling to process that they had just witnessed the most anticlimactic end to an invasion in military history. "General," Dr. Reeves called from his monitoring station, "the Lazarus engine is beginning its shutdown sequence." On the main display, real-time footage from Antarctica showed the ancient structure gradually dimming. The crystalline formations that had emerged from the sublimated ice were retracting back into the Earth, their blue-white radiance fading to a soft pulse that grew weaker with each passing minute. The quantum distortions that had been affecting gravitational fields across 3 continents were stabilizing, returning local space-time to normal parameters. "Remarkable," Dr. Reeves murmured, watching the energy readings drop toward baseline levels. "Our ancestors built something that could have unmade reality itself, but programmed it with enough wisdom to recognize when the threat had passed. It knows the difference between defense and vengeance." "The real question," Brooks replied, studying satellite feeds showing the global reaction to the aliens' departure, "is what happens now. Word of this encounter will spread throughout whatever galactic community exists out there. Humanity is no longer hidden." Admiral Martinez joined them at the central display, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and apprehension. "Maybe that's not entirely a bad thing, Patricia. We've been hiding for 12,000 years, afraid of what we might become if we stepped back onto the galactic stage. Perhaps it's time we stopped being afraid of our own potential." 3 months later, the first human diplomatic vessel launched from Luna Station toward the Alpha Centauri system. The ship carried a carefully selected crew of ambassadors, scientists, cultural representatives, and teachers, individuals chosen not for their capacity to project power, but for their ability to bridge the gap between species that had spent millennia fearing each other. The vessel's name had been chosen after extensive debate in the United Nations. Second Chance. Captain Maria Santos, a former peace negotiator who had spent her career mediating conflicts in Earth's most dangerous regions, stood on the bridge as her ship prepared to engage its newly designed quantum drive, technology reverse-engineered from principles discovered within the Lazarus engine, but adapted for exploration rather than destruction. "All stations report ready for quantum jump," her navigation officer announced. "Take us out, Lieutenant," Santos ordered, "and transmit our standard greeting on all frequencies as we approach the system." The message that would herald humanity's return to galactic civilization was simple, broadcast in 17 different languages that xenolinguists had painstakingly reconstructed from ancient archives. "This is the Earth vessel's second chance. We come in peace, seeking dialogue and mutual understanding. We offer knowledge, friendship, and the promise that the mistakes of our past will not be repeated. We have learned the difference between strength and wisdom, between power and responsibility. We hope you will give us the opportunity to prove that growth is possible, even for species that have forgotten their way." In the deepest archives of 24 civilizations, ancient records were quietly updated. The entry for humanity was changed from extinct, approach forbidden, to awakened, proceed with respect and caution. The wolves had learned humility without forgetting their fangs. They had remembered that true strength wasn't the capacity to destroy everything in your path. It was the wisdom to protect what mattered most, and the restraint to choose peace even when you possessed the power to enforce any other outcome. Humanity was back, and this time, they were ready to be the species the galaxy needed them to be. Not as conquerors or destroyers, but as guardians and teachers, shepherds who had finally learned the difference between protecting the flock and devouring it. The shepherd had remembered his fangs, and in doing so, had proven he no longer needed to bear them.